I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championship.
Something stupid is coming out of his mouth.
I don't know. Maybe it's just my age. He needs his vote pulled immediately. And of course, yes, a season like this has to have a name.
Let's talk about something good about Justin Freck. What are you doing?
The season of dreams. Ohio State, my guys, are either the best or the second best program in the history of college football.
This guy is a bonehead. They love him.
I question your judgment as an adult. I really do.
I was a total hater. I know that for a fact, and I just don't get it.
Get us back our sleeves.
And say, bring me that. That's the one I want. Hey, welcome to Juckonbucks, the weekend show. That's how I used to introduce this back when I used to do the weekend show every weekend. And I still have done a show every weekend, but I've not called it the weekend show. It's usually been like me and Dylan on a Sunday, or it's been the post-game show on Saturday. But what I did when I started was, and it was the off season. So you get everybody working all week with all the podcasters, and they do all their shows. And then come the weekend, they would take the weekend off. And that was, all right, this is my in. I can do a long weekend show. And then people who normally watch these shows all week will be out of material, and they'll say, oh, I'll give this guy a try. And I don't know if it worked or not, but that's what I did every weekend. And this one feels kind of like one of those weekend shows because we don't have any games this weekend. So it's one of those weekend shows. When I say we don't have any games, I mean, we do have one great game. We've got Army-Navy. Go Army, beat Navy. Shout out to my oldest boy, the Ace Man. Shout out to all you veterans, whether you be on one side of that classic American rivalry or the other. It's always a fun game. Going to be even more fun this year because they're both really good. But we got a lot to go over today. We got some portal news. We got some awards, some really good news. We've got some recruiting news. We've got some Tennessee folks who are feeding off the negativity. And we got to wipe that out because we can't. Maybe it's okay that they're getting like this. I actually kind of want them like this because it's firing me up. You know what I mean? I got a question from one of you guys that got me thinking about Ohio State fandom and the ups and downs of it. And we're going to go over that as well. But first, let's start with those awards. So got me thinking, last year's Iron Bowl, 2023, Alabama had the ball 4th and goal from like Auburn's 30-yard line. 4th and goal from the 30. They needed a touchdown to win. 40 seconds left. And Milroe hits Isaiah Bond in the back corner of the end zone. Alabama wins. But how did they get 4th and goal from the 30? Their center, Seth McLaughlin, snapped the ball before Milroe was ready. It shoots by him, and he has to go fall on the ball, recover it back at the 30. And, of course, Alabama wins the game, but boy, had they not. What we saw after the Michigan game with Alabama would have happened after the Iron Bowl. Now, there is video of one of those Auburn players running up and giving the snap, and that's why he snapped the ball. So it really wasn't his fault. But based on the fact that they had trouble all year, McLaughlin and Jalen Milroe with the snaps, obviously it was thought that was his fault. So you get to the Michigan game, the Rose Bowl, and it's a close game. They have some more snapping issues. Alabama loses the game, and Seth McLaughlin was roasted mercilessly. And he knew that he immediately had to go to the portal. And I've seen some things like Alabama cut him loose. Like, that's not how it happened. Saban wanted him to say. They did not want him to go. He knew he had to go. He had a letdown season anyway in 2023. His season in 2022 was very good, but a letdown season in 23 and the vitriol from the fans was merciless. We're college football fans. It's what we do. It sucks, but it is what it is. And he went to find greener pastures, had a huge offer from Texas A&M, and he decides that he's going to come to Ohio State. And that probably happened, 2 days after he hit the portal. I mean, it was lickety split. Now, when Ohio State signed Seth, ignorant people who didn't know football thought that he was some trash lineman, and they roasted Ohio State mercilessly because all they knew of this guy was the snapping issues. They made fun of us. They made fun of us for Will Howard. And it's really ironic because like a week later, they were all saying after we brought in 4 more transfers on top of those 2, that Ohio State bought an all-star team, right? They bought an all-star team, but you were just ripping us for 25% of this class. Seth McLaughlin, Will Howard, a bunch of losers, and a quarterback who was going to get replaced. Like, all of a sudden, now they bought an all-star team. Whatever. That's not my point. My point is, those of us who knew Seth was a good lineman thought, whatever, he's got some snapping issues. If they can figure him out, okay. If not, he'll be a great guard because the dude can block. That's for sure. But he goes in and he wins the starting center job over Carson Hinsman. But he didn't just win that. He won over the room. He was so smart that he picked up everything immediately, so much so that experienced linemen in the Ohio State room were asking him questions in spring. A humble guy, a great attitude, and right out of the gate, an excellent teammate. And as soon as we saw him on the field, it was apparent what this team could look like with a good center. And I'm not taking anything away from Carson Hinsman. The year before in 2023, he was thrust into that role when Luke Whippler entered the draft. That was unexpected. Carson wasn't ready, and Ohio State wasn't prepared with a guy who was ready. So Carson was all they had. And everybody did the best they could. Carson did the best he could. They coached him up the best he could. It was an oversight to not have someone ready or know that Luke was going. At any rate, with Seth in there, it looked a whole lot different. And as the weeks got on, we realized, wow, this dude is so good. And then we got the news after game number 10 that he injured himself at practice, and it looked like a season ender. And I was so upset for the team. I was so upset for him. And the night that that news broke, the hat that he made the hats, the Run the Damn Ball hats, sold them himself, shipped them himself, which I didn't know at the time, and then just turned the money over to the Mid-Ohio Food Bank. Did all that on his own because he said, as a lineman, I like to eat a lot, and it hurts my feelings to think that people don't have enough food. And he looks so much older than he is, and he talks so much older than he is, but you forget that this is a 23-year-old, right? Guy seems like he's 35 with an MBA. I mean, really smart dude. Big heart. And I just felt so bad for him because in those 10 games that he played, not only did he play good, but I felt like this dude made a case to win the Remington Trophy as the best center in the country. And in those 10 weeks, he did play so good that he got himself nominated to win the Remington Award. And Thursday night, Seth McLaughlin, in those 10 games, won the Remington Award as the best center in the country, beating out Tennessee's center and Western Michigan's center. And he is now a Remington Award winner. But that's not all. On top of winning the Remington Award, there are 5 recognized associations that vote on All-Americans. 2 of them have already voted and announced their All-American team. Seth McLaughlin has been recognized as a first-team All-American on both of the 2 that have already come out, as has Caleb Downs. Those 2 guys need one more of those remaining 3 to be consensus All-Americans. And consensus All-Americans at Ohio State get a tree in the Buckeye Grove. That, to me, and I'll be honest, when he got hurt, I was thinking, like, it made me really sad. And I was like, I wonder how these guys that come and transfer for 1 year are going to be remembered. Because I feel like this guy was such a great Buckeye in the 1 year he was here. How's he going to be remembered? This guy's going to win one more of those. He's going to win one more. Seth McLaughlin is going to get a tree in the Grove. And yeah, he's going to be remembered unbelievably fondly, which is awesome. Like, we don't have enough history to know, like, how we're going to remember these guys that, people call them 1 year rentals. Like, how are you going to remember those dudes? Some of them are going to really stand out, and some of them are going to be legendary, which Seth McLaughlin with the tree in the Grove. I mean, I don't want to get too excited before it gets announced, but I don't see any way he's going to get shut out of all 3 of those. Really exciting stuff, man. Really exciting stuff. And I just love that dude. He's awesome. So congrats to Seth McLaughlin from Buford High School in Georgia, Powerhouse High School in Georgia. You guys are familiar with Buford. Buford, the high school of Edric Houston. Edric Houston, future Buckeye superstar, just got moved in from the edge to the inside. Buford also home to hopefully future Buckeye superstar Bryce Perry Wright. He is another defensive lineman from Buford High School, the number 2 defensive lineman in the country. I've talked to him a few times throughout his recruitment about Ohio State. They're heavily in the mix. And he was in town for the game, as every recruit Ohio State is in the mix for, was in town during the game, because there were a few opportunities, obviously, to spread those visits out because all the games were at noon. But he is the number 2 defensive lineman in the country, and the number 1 defensive lineman in the country, Aiden Harris, from Weddington High School in North Carolina, the same high school as Buckeye commit Trajan Odom, who just signed. Trajan Odom, also a defensive lineman. Bucks are in big for Aiden Harris, and most people think that he might actually commit relatively soon here. So what I'm telling you is the number 1 and the number 2 defensive linemen in high school right now currently have older teammates that are defensive linemen at Ohio State. That sounds like a pretty healthy advantage. That would be pretty damn cool. But that's not the only reason I'm bringing up Buford High School. I'm bringing up Buford because a running back that Tony Alfraud could not close the deal on, go figure. I'm sorry. I take my shots every time I can. I'm petty. I'm a petty guy, okay? But Tony Alford could not land Justice Haynes. Got close. Came down to Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State. Some people thought we were second. He got close, but he couldn't land Justice Haynes. Justice Haynes, one of the most prolific running backs in Georgia high school football history. The number 4 all-time leading rusher in Georgia high school football history, 7,758 yards, over 100 career touchdowns, 10 yards a carry. It was his career average. He was the number 3 running back in the country coming out of Buford. And as a pitcher, an 86-mile-an-hour fastball. We're talking about a total stud. As a true freshman, did not get the ball much, but he did end up carrying the ball 4 times for 31 yards in that playoff game against Michigan. This year, he went into the year with Jam Miller splitting carries, we thought, but Justice just got 79 carries to Jam Miller's 135. He did end up with 463 yards and 7 touchdowns, but he's not happy. So he's hopped in the portal. And I'm telling you this because Rivals insiders for Alabama said that they think Ohio State is a big player here. Brett Greenberg from Bama 247 said, as for potential landing spots, one school has been brought up in a few different conversations to me, and that's Ohio State. Then we also have a little smoke on Michigan as well. Tony Alford also, obviously has a relationship with him, and now they've got some money. So Justice Haynes, it looks like right now, is going to be an Ohio State-Michigan battle. And he's not the only back the Buckeyes are after right now, but let's quickly go over what the running back room is going to look like next year. So the Buckeyes are clearly trying to pair a veteran running back to be a 1-2 punch with James Peoples, known around here as Jimmy the Peoples. Coming off of his freshman year, where he showed us quite a few flashes. The folks around the Woody think he's something special. I think so too. I know a lot of you do as well. We got the 3 incoming freshmen with Turbo Rogers, who's not your typical 3-down back, but we'll call him our special back. Then we got Bo Jackson, who can do it all. Big time, powerful, breakaway speed, not too shifty, but no wasted motion. Then you got Isaiah West, another 3-down back, big, strong, tough as nails. Gets up to top speed quick, but doesn't have the breakaway speed Bo does. Bo's got some injury concerns. It's great to have Isaiah in there with him because of that. Then you got Sam Williams-Dixon, who's a sophomore who could help you in a pinch, as well as TC Caffey, coming off of 2 straight years of injuries. I'm hoping TC sticks around. I don't have any reason to think that he wouldn't, other than, maybe at this point he might look for an opportunity to go play because he's going to be buried. I think him and Sam Williams-Dixon will probably be 5 and 6 in this running back room. But my fear was Ohio State was going to bring in an average veteran running back who had experience just because they were nervous about the inexperience in the running back room. Well, these 2 dudes are Quentin Joyner and Justice Haynes, not average running backs that are experienced. Quentin Joyner is on campus right now. And Quentin Joyner is from USC, had a similar amount of carries to Justice last year. He was a stud out of high school, out of Texas, top 100 guy, ended up going to USC. He's 5'11", 216, and that was 2 years ago. So both of these guys have spent 2 years in college, 2 years of eligibility left, and might even be 3 with the limited number of carries as a freshman, though I doubt either of them will make it that far. But anyway, this past year, similar workload, 64 carries, 460 yards, 7.3 yards a carry. That is tied for 4th in the country, along with Ashton Genty. Travian Henderson, 6.8 yards a carry. So we're talking about a guy who is a very impressive running back. He's a total dude, and he's on campus this weekend. Now, I know I said just the other day that I'm not going to get into this again like I did last year, talking about every transfer portal guy that the Buckeyes are linked to, because last year when I did it, the vast majority of the guys that I talked about, it never came to fruition. But this is different. Our man's on campus right now, and that's pretty exciting. But he's not the only one on campus. And I do like this plan now. I like this plan of didn't like the plan of bringing in an average back. But these are a couple of dudes. And they're not just going to settle for an average back, which is what I was worried about. We're bringing in a dude here, and that's exciting. I don't know how much a dude running back costs in the transfer portal. Obviously, he costs more than USC was willing to pay him. Same with Justice. But the other visitor this weekend is a guy that, is a necessity. I don't really think a running back is a necessity. It absolutely is a necessity, as we know, to get quite a few offensive linemen. And the best interior lineman that the Buckeyes are currently after, and the one that they're closest to getting right now, is the Northwestern guard, Josh Thompson from Fenton, Michigan, 6'5", 300. Dude was excellent last year for Northwestern, rated as one of the top 5 interior linemen in the portal. He's got visits lined up after Ohio State this weekend, and he's the first lineman that they've had in. Now, there's no excuse to let this guy get out there to those visits. We should see a commitment coming Monday for him. They got him in. Don't let him leave. Don't let him leave. He's signing right now this weekend. That's what's got to start happening. We need to see these dudes pile up because they're going to come off the board quicker than not. There are guys that are going to be scheduled to visit Ohio State that are not going to make it to those visits with Ohio State because they're going to go somewhere else, and they're not going to let him leave. And I hope that we see the same thing with him. Earlier this week, I mentioned that Jackson Cantwell, the number 1 lineman in the class of 2026, was also visiting this weekend. He's coming in. Nothing to get super excited about. He's visited the schools that he's very interested in multiple times already. He's doing his due diligence. He's checking out Michigan. He's checking out Ohio State this weekend and next weekend. And ultimately, I think this is a kid who stays around home, which is the Missouri-Nebraska area, in that neck of the woods. And Nebraska and Missouri, they got their money up and they're paying. Nebraska just paid a big amount of money to take Missouri's star defensive tackle, who they just landed last year, 5-star Mr. Everything, William Somweri. And he jumped in the portal after 1 year at Missouri, and Nebraska just signed him. So Nebraska, under Matt Rule, they got their bowl game. They're signing expensive dudes in the portal. They got it cooking. And I thought that Matt Rule would be able to do this, but I also thought that Luke Fickell at Wisconsin would be able to do it. So far, just 2 5-7 seasons, but he did sign a couple of guys out of the portal already, and he had a pretty good class this year. So rooting for him, man, rooting for him. But right now, Matt Rule, it's not really a fair comparison, right? Nebraska, way more history and way more money to support Matt Rule. But I did think that we would see a better season this year out of Wisconsin. I don't know if you guys remember that I did an episode a little bit ago where I was making fun of Billy Napier, as I do sometimes. But they've got a defensive coordinator at Florida who looks like that redheaded kid from The Sandlot. Anyway, his name's Austin Armstrong. And he doesn't just look like the redheaded kid from The Sandlot, but he's a really strange dude. And this dude just got picked off. He just got hired away from Florida to go be the defensive coordinator at Houston. Florida just lost their defensive coordinator to Houston. Man, that's embarrassing, Florida. Michigan has been predicted to land Billy Edwards. He is a quarterback from Maryland. They also signed a 6'5" wide receiver from Indiana named Donovan McCulley. And Iowa signed Hank Brown. Hank Brown is that quarterback, young kid who started a couple games down at Auburn when they benched Peyton Thorne. They went to this kid, Hank Brown. I think he won a game for him. And then after that, it was no good. But Iowa's spending money in the portal to try and get a quarterback. So Big Ten trying to spend their new money. I like it. I want to see these teams invest in their programs. I want to see the entire conference raise up and give us better football games. So looking forward to all that. But Tennessee, baby. Tennessee coming into the shoe. And the Tennessee fans are getting a little bit loud, a little bit overconfident. They're feeding off the Ohio State negativity. And here I spent the last week being complimentary of the Tennessee fan base. A very classy move they pulled for that little fan. I made a whole video about it. And then they had to go ruin it. They're pounding their chest, the SEC drum, talking about how the game played out, saying that if you guys had trouble with that Michigan team, wait till you see Big Orange on the field. They have not quite caught on to the fact that the game is a season unto its own. That things are different in that game. That coaches coach and players play different in that game. And it is undoubtedly clear that the coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes and his coaching staff coach different in that game than they do throughout the rest of the season. So knowing that that game is totally different, as we do, how much should we take from that game as we project forward into the playoffs, into this Tennessee matchup? Well, the game plan in the game was something that we hadn't seen all year. It clearly didn't work. I don't think that's what's in store for Big Orange. But for the sake of argument, humor me here. Let's say that the game was a season unto its own. And let's just set it aside just for the sake of argument. And let's look at the 11 other games that Ohio State played this season. Ohio State, one loss to the number one team in their place by 1 point. We saw Ohio State go into Happy Valley and punk Penn State in front of a record crowd in their stupid lion roar. Welcome the new kid on the block who wanted to play with the big boys, top 5 Indiana, punked them. How about Tennessee? They beat Alabama by a touchdown. Big win there. Their second time in 3 years beating Bama. That's obviously very exciting for them because it felt like 20 years in a row we watched them lose that game, which isn't surprising. This is the dumbest administration in the history of college football. I often talk about, when we talk about head coaches, the leader, the boss, the leader, the boss. There are innate qualities about excellent leaders, and they're not incredibly hard to spot. They're rare people. They're special people. They're hard to come by. But those special qualities are easy to spot. The only thing that's easier to spot than those special qualities is spotting somebody without them. Eliminating someone who clearly does not have them. These fools down in Tennessee, man, they went through a run hiring the biggest group of bozos you could ever imagine to be stewards of the most valuable entity that the state of Tennessee owns, the Tennessee Volunteer Football Team. It's comical. Derek Dooley, the guy who lost the game with 13 men on the field. Butch Jones, the champion of life, Butch Jones.
They've won the biggest championship, and that's a championship of life.
Lane Kiffin, back before he got fired on the tarmac at USC, he stayed in Knoxville for a year. He wanted to go coach a blue blood. Jeremy Pruitt. Jeremy Pruitt was so bad that Tennessee, for the first time in their history, cooperated with the NCAA just to get him fired for cause. That's, of course, right before Tennessee took the NCAA to court to essentially get all the NIL rules thrown out and get us in this wonderful mess we're all in right now throughout college football. Thank you, Tennessee. Tennessee sent their co-eds, the good-looking chicks. They called them hosts. They sent them to high school football games to hold up signs, rub up on the 17-year-olds after the game. The nerve to think that they're going to come into Ohio Stadium and intimidate us because of the SEC badge they wear on their chest, a conference that Tennessee has been abused in for the last 20 years. Bad news coming, bud. They're walking into a hornet's nest. You know it. I know it. And you might have gotten lucky if that game was played last Saturday. But there's been ample time now. We'll put that loss to our rival in proper perspective. We'll deal with it when it's time. But this Saturday, the Buckeyes are going to deal with Big Orange. Big Orange, that creamy orange, whatever you call that, man. What is that color? Look, to pretend like you like that color, I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. I know how this goes. You'll never get me to admit that the Cleveland Browns color scheme is the most hideous in the National Football League. You'll never get me to admit it. And I'm sure that you will never admit you are jealous as hell over the real UT in their burnt orange, which is pretty damn sharp. Even Clemson in their orange. You got the sissy orange. You got the effeminate orange. That's what we'll call it. The feminine orange. All those Vols who voluntarily are coming up all the way to Ohio State, 6-hour drive. They're going to be disappointed, but they're used to that as they've had nothing to cheer for since 1998. How about this year? They beat NC State back when NC State was supposed to be good. We found out they're not. They beat Oklahoma 25-15. We celebrated that win at the time, not so much anymore. They lost to Arkansas, and it was a pretty tough Arkansas team. So tough that Jackson Dart threw for 515 yards and 6 touchdowns against them. Then they let bonehead Billy Napier and his Gators take them to overtime at Neyland Stadium. They beat the worst Kentucky team in a decade, and that's saying something, by 10 points. The Georgia game. I thought it was going to be Tennessee's night, that game. They started out hot, absolutely manhandled in the second half, losing 31-17 by tougher men, flat out, tougher men. And they finished the season with mighty UTEP and Vanderbilt. We came into this season thinking that they might have a bit of a juggernaut of an offense. The previous most expensive quarterback in the history of college football, Nico Iamaleava, not coming along as quickly as they had hoped. These are the folks who said that Brew McCoy, Chris Brazel, and Squirrel White were going to be one of the top wide receiving cores in the country. And I know what you're saying. Who? That's right. While Jeremiah Smith polishes his Freshman of the Year award. Tennessee, man. How about can we compare programs? Can we do that? Ohio State, all-time winning percentage, 735. That's first. 67 for Tennessee. That's good. That's 11th. Ohio State national championships, 8. Tennessee, 6. All-time wins. Ohio State, 3rd. Tennessee, 10th. Consensus All-Americans. Ohio State, 2nd. Tennessee, 13th. Heisman Trophy winners. Ohio State's got 7. That's 2nd. Tennessee, they're tied for 38th with 0. No Heisman's, Tennessee. NFL draft picks, 489 for the Buckeyes. That's 3rd. Tennessee, 13th. First round draft picks, 91. That's first for Ohio State. 47 for Tennessee. That puts them at 12. Weeks in the AP poll. Tennessee, 634. That's a lot of weeks. Tennessee, that's 13th. Ohio State, 998. That's first. Weeks at number 1. 105 for Ohio State. That's second. Tennessee, 19. That's 19th. Tennessee's a good program. There's no doubt. They're a very good program. They fall just outside of a blue blood. The traditional blue bloods, of course, Nebraska, Oklahoma, USC, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, and Texas, the real UT. The 8 traditional blue bloods, and that's all there will ever be. One of them is Texas. And Tennessee fans got the nerve to call Texas UT Junior. Out of the 12 major categories by which we judge a college football program, Texas beats Tennessee in 10 of those categories, same as Ohio State beats them in 10. That's why Texas is a blue blood, albeit the 8th ranked blue blood of all the blue bloods, and Tennessee isn't close. After Texas, there's a big gap down to Georgia at number 9, and then Tennessee at number 10. So it's Tennessee, the feminine orange, who is UT Junior, and it's Ohio State, who's about to beat both of them in the next 5 games they play. If you are a repeat viewer and you like the show, do me a favor and please subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much. All right, that's the external stuff. That's the Ohio against the world stuff. We come together, the scarlet and gray, against any other color, maize and blue, feminine orange, whatever it may be, we come together for that fight. But there is some division in the scarlet and gray. Let's talk about it. Time for a family meeting. What is it that you love about college football? There's the classic go-tos, the stadiums, the pageantry, the rivalries, the insane fans, some personal favorites of mine, uniforms. They kill the NFL or any other sport. Helmets. I'm obviously a big helmet guy. Each fan base has its own little personalities and its own traditions. I love that. And we, as Ohio State fans, are happy and lucky to be fans of a school that makes up 50% of the greatest rivalry in the history of American sport. And sometimes we love that, and sometimes we hate it. And I have said before earlier this year that there was part of me that felt a different way about the rivalry. I'm someone who always kind of like Urban, who had a great deal of respect for that program that went along with the hatred. And the game brought about fear in me like no other. And when they handled the Stallions thing the way they handled, with such an FU to everything that I stand for just as a man, it rubbed me in such a wrong way that I no longer felt like they deserved, for me, just my stance, they no longer deserve for me to put so much into this rivalry. They just didn't deserve that. It's a good thing. It's a great thing. I love it. Like, they don't deserve it if they're going to act like that. You look at the people who have stepped out of bounds, like in our family, Terrell Pryor, for instance, he was ostracized. He was kicked out of the family for 5 years. And this guy brought all this heat on. Number one, it didn't even make any sense. Brought all the heat on and had the whole country calling him cheaters, and they treated him like a king. It made no sense. And even more so, it was just part of this screw you mindset to just decency, following rules, things like that. And it bothered me that much. But as the game got closer, all the normal feelings came rushing back. And, the way I thought I was going to feel come game time, it all changed. And of course, the game happened, and it certainly didn't hurt any less. In fact, it hurt worse, way worse, because when it's like your own guy punching you in the gut, it just hurts worse. It felt like the 90s. It felt like a very familiar feeling, to be honest. But as we look at the game, now we are still in the playoffs, and this isn't something new. Ever since the 4-team playoff came about in 2014, the championship has still been available to Ohio State if they lose the game. Just 2 years ago, we lost the game and still had the playoffs. It's nothing new that the playoffs are still available to us having lost the game. Hell, in the BCS in 2006, when we played the Florida Gators for the national championship, Florida was in that game, but only because Urban politicked his butt off and Lloyd Carr wouldn't have any of it. Had he done that, it very well might have been a rematch of Ohio State and Michigan in the BCS era when there were only 2 teams, and they would have lost and played in the BCS championship against Ohio State. So it is nothing new for Ohio State to have an opportunity at the playoffs and having lost the game. Nothing's changed on that front, right? Nothing's changed at all. 2 years ago, you lose to Michigan, you're in the playoffs. Now, you lose to Michigan, you're in the 12-team playoff. But I got a lot of comments from you guys yesterday, a lot of tweets, and I was talking about Ross Bjork's media tour. And I had gone over some of those interviews, talked about what he said, and there was one that I hadn't watched. And I got some nasty reactions and then got it sent to me, and it was about an interview that he did on the podcast and something that he said that I hadn't heard. So I watched it, and we're going to play it right now and go over this together here.
The expectations, we know how the last 3 years have gone, and this year it didn't go our way. But what you learn is that the magnification of that game is massive, even more than you can describe. I mean, you always hear about the game and the team up north, and they don't wear red and we don't wear blue, and we cross out the M's, and they have a countdown clock and we have a countdown clock. So you see those things, but until you kind of walk on game day, you don't really understand it. Until you kind of see all the production behind it, you don't really understand it. And so that was neat. That was neat to see. Clearly, we wanted to play better, and the players know that, the coaches know that. And so then you have to say, okay, what do you learn from? Do you need to tweak anything? Do we need to adjust the way we talk about that game? Not to say, you can't say it's just another game. You can't say that.
You're not going to. Why would we need to adjust the way we talk about the game?
There's no way you say that. But you look at other rivalries. Army-Navy is getting played this weekend. They have countdown clocks, and they have different things, but yet they play, 11 other games. And
what are we getting at here? What are we getting at here? They play 11 other. Yeah, so do we. I don't understand what we're getting at. It sounds to me like we're getting at, we want to minimize the game. That's what it sounds like to me. Does it sound like that to you?
So how do you have big picture thinking, but also hone in on that game? I think you learn from other coaches. Woody handled it a different way, right? Tressel handled it a different way. Urban handled it a different way. And Coach probably has a little more of the Urban style of handling that game. Coach Day.
Coach Day handles it like Urban. All right, so we're done with Ross. My point is, when I heard that, he's clearly trying to find a way to minimize the discussion around the game, minimize the talk. He said, they play 11 other games. Yeah, we do too. I don't know why there is this effort to minimize the game all of a sudden, but when I heard that, I understood what some of these comments were about. Bjork is a coward. He has no clue what Ohio State-Michigan rivalry really means to real Buckeye fans. With Bjork and Day running the show, it won't be long, and those two will be advocating for participation trophies. So then I understood what everybody was getting at. It's clear that that's what was going on, but when I heard it, it brought me back to a show that Chris and I were doing, I think maybe last Monday, and he said, did you see what Berm said? Compared this to a Chiefs-Bills game.
Like I hate the idea of devaluing the rivalry, but we also have to accept reality in this new world. And I keep going back to 3 weeks ago when the Buffalo Bills beat the Chiefs, right?
Yeah.
When the Chiefs win their third straight Super Bowl, are they going to care that they lost to the Bills in the regular season? And the answer is no. Now, that said, everything we've ever built our entire identities around as kids growing up in Ohio is Ohio State and Michigan. And it is hard to, get yourself out of that mindset.
Why do we need to think about it a different way? As I just said, this is not new. We were just in the same position 2 years ago. Lost the game in the playoffs. And we will be again moving forward. There doesn't need to be any minimization of the game. You can still go win the championship. And if we do, a lot of us will be a lot happier. Many of you will not be much happier. I've heard from you. I think you'll be a little happier than you think. But some of you don't think that you'll be hit. 20% of you in my poll did not think you would be much happier and said you still wouldn't be bought in. A lot of us, 65% of us, will be very much happier with the national championship. And that is what will change the sentiment of the game, going and winning that. Not people minimizing or trying to pretend like we need to minimize the game. What you're doing there is, it looks like people who support Coach Day being the head coach and want him to remain the head coach are moving the goalposts for Coach Day and trying to get the public to rally around them moving the goalpost. Nothing needs to change. Go win the national championship. Things will get better. Don't win the national championship. That game doesn't get to mean less. That's not the way that works. So really disappointing, man. It's really disappointing to see a brand new AD come in his first time we go through the game. Ohio State loses, and he wants to change the conversation around the game because Army and Navy, well, they have a countdown clock too, but they play 11 other games. The guy, formerly the most respected voice in Ohio State media for years, he all year long said if Ryan Day loses this game, he's going to get fired. Ohio State can't lose that game. And literally the Monday after, he's coming out saying that. It's not a good look, man. It is not a good look. But I want to get to another question here. Our buddy CF32191 says, "Hey, Juck, how do you deal with the constant ups and downs of being a fan? It can definitely be hard to be a fan with how toxic from inside and outside the program things can get when things aren't going our way." I think it's a great topic of discussion. Let's start with, I've always thought that there are three different kinds of fan in every fan base. You have fans that have expectations that are incredibly unrealistic. And because of those expectations, everything that comes out of their mouth is a negative tone. Everything. Very few wins ever satisfy them because they only focus on the things that could have been better. And there's a place for that. There's definitely a time when a win, all wins are created equal. If you, for instance, play a middling Michigan State team and the run defense looks terrible, but you win the game, fair to talk about that game in the analysis and say, yeah, this was not good. How does this project looking forward? But this particular style of fan wants to point those things out, even in a great win against a great team like Penn State, for instance. They got no joy out of that Penn State win. They wanted to come out of that game and focus on what went wrong. Will Howard's fumble. There were plenty of things that went wrong in that game, but that's a top 5 game. You can win it by 1 point. That's all that matters. And that's why I love those games. That's all you got to do. Just win. We don't got to worry about anything else. But they're going to be negative because the expectations are rarely ever met. And if they were around in the 2002 season, they probably were unhappy for 65% of those games that season. Probably more. And when the season ends in disappointment, they'll look at all of us and say, I told you so. Well, you're negative every year. It doesn't matter. Like, yeah, you're usually going to be right because it's usually not going to end in a national championship. Doesn't make you right. But there's no talking them out of this line of thinking. That's just the way they are. On the flip side, and equally as annoying to me, but they can't understand why, you got the folks who are blindly supportive of anything happening, any decisions being made by the people in charge. To this type, a win is a win, even if by 1 point over Akron. That's a win. Why are you complaining? But we're 5-0. Like, that means everything. It's 5-0. That's it. Doesn't matter if it's a 1 point win over Akron in your 5th game. And they are blown away by people that have criticisms. They can't understand it. Not only can they not understand it because they're 100% positive all the time, they think anybody that questions anything is a bad fan. Not only a bad fan, but that they should go root for someone else. These are the gatekeepers of the fan base. You're either with us or against us, and with us means you can't say anything bad. They have a hard time thinking anybody could possibly have any criticisms that are valid. They say things like, maybe you should go coach the team. If you have any analysis at all that doesn't skew with their way of thinking. They have a hard time grasping that the program that they root for is going to be judged against the best of the best teams at all times. And when the run defense looks bad against a middling Michigan State team, they're going to get irritated when you point it out. And when the season ends in disappointment, they're going to say the boys did great. The coach did great. We love our Buckeyes. Then you got the third group. And the third group makes up the majority of people. And those people have expectations that are very high because they root for a top 5 program in the history of college football. But this group understands that that doesn't mean you're going to win a national championship every 3rd year. You will, in fact, lose big games. Sometimes you're going to slip up and lose games you shouldn't lose. But they also understand that you need to be cashing in against your rival more often than not. You need to win your conference roughly a third of the seasons and putting yourself in position for a national championship more often than not, cashing in once a decade. This group is very logical and very rational. and understands what the standards historically have been throughout Ohio State football and wants Ohio State to continually measure up and try to level that up. This group watches games with Ohio State as a big favorite and gets happy when they win and look like the favorite. This group watches a game like Penn State and comes out talking about the awesome offensive line performance that won the game and is extremely happy. Mistake to be damned, it was a top 5 matchup. Gritty, gutty performance. This group desperately wants to support everything and every regime at Ohio State, but understands this is a business and it's a win business. And sometimes the people who were chosen to be put in place as stewards of the program maybe are not checking all of the boxes. And this group understands you only get a limited amount of time to show that you are going to meet those expectations. This group also dictates the feel of the fan base. The coach starts to lose this group, and that's when you start to get the feel of things slipping away. And the current regime is losing this group. And this is why you feel the way you feel. This is why you feel the excess amount of negativity, because it's that group right there. You call them swing voters, but in American politics, the swing voters are a very small portion, 10% of the American voter. In this particular thing, I think that this portion is probably 60%. There's 20 of the always negative, 20 of the always happy. This is the 60. This is the big block. But the big block is sliding the other way on the current regime. However, they are open to coming back in depending on what happens here in this next run. And the good news is, I think that this is going to be a really good run. And I think that it's going to start on Saturday with our friends in the Feminine Orange. It's also important to understand that you and I, and people who are watching this show and shows like this and who are active on Twitter are such a small portion of our fan base. Just a sliver. You got to keep in mind that the number that they put on Ohio State fandom is like 13 million. We can go ahead and say 9 to 11 million of them are what we call, what I call hoodie Ohio State fans. They wear their hoodie. They may watch the postseason game. They may watch the Michigan game. They may not even watch that. But if you ask them who they're a fan of, they say Ohio State. We've all got people in our family like that. Then you got the fan that watches the Buckeyes every week, almost every week. They never miss a game. They couldn't tell you who the defensive coordinator is, right? Then there are probably 4 more levels of seriousness before you get to us, the 0.002%. And I came to that figure once based on some equations, but I think it's fairly accurate. The 0.002% are those of us who live and die with this, seek out knowledge about it every single day. We don't like to be out of the loop of anything going on, and we know all of the coaches, some of their children's names. Like, this is something that we put so much stock into that it hurts. And it hurts when you've got people who you can normally count on to make you feel good, to hear your Buckeye news, and everything coming out of their mouth is negative. And I understand that. And I always try to mix in anything negative with some positive, because I get where you're coming from. And I think that's what I've tried to do today, and I hope that I have. We did take down Tennessee, obviously. We will not be minimizing the game around here. That's not what a real Ohio State fan would ever want to do, unless they were compromised by something somehow. And that's a shame. But I can't imagine that anybody would ever voluntarily just say, let's go ahead and minimize that. But if you were to do it, you can do it. And if you're on the winning streak, right? If you're the ones on top, you can attempt to do something like that. You certainly don't get to do that when you've lost 4 in a row. Anyway, guys, it is 2:30 in the morning on Saturday morning. I'm going to finish this puppy up. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. You guys are fantastic. I love you. I can't wait to watch this Army-Navy game later on. We'll talk about that. Maybe we'll pop on Sunday and do a little something. Maybe not. We'll see how my voice feels. You know, I don't know if you know this, but when you do this and you talk for an hour straight, it can really strain the vocal cords. I could have never been a singer. I'm too much of a sissy because it hurts. I whine to Nina upstairs afterwards. I really do. She'll tell you. All right. Talk to you guys later. Juckonbucks out.
He needs his vote pulled immediately.
And I'll say, I don't care. The leader, the boss. Where is Josh Heupel?
The largest humans he can find.
You got Miami and Georgia and Florida State and Tennessee and Texas A&M.
Kirby wants you.
LSU and Ole Miss.
Not even a football player, but he's 6'10", 334. Kirby said, sign me up. That's all they've got to offer when it comes to a defensive player. What could they possibly say other than, how down do you have to be for a win? Let us pay you. All they got to be is enormous. What could they possibly say?
Knock the team out west. Oh, well.
They'll take him if they're lowly rated, too.
I'm not some guy who's some Big Ten homer.
Behind that,
I will never find it acceptable. I want to see it, man.
because they've got nothing else to go on.